Oh, welcome to another episode of the Growth Compass. Shout out to our sponsor, Senders. If you want to do cold email deliverability properly, hit the link in the description. But without them, it would not be possible to connect with awesome people doing awesome things like Dan White. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's nice
Man,
to
this
meet
is
you.
so, yeah, this is so cool. Dan knows. I don't know how many other people know. I don't anyone outside of my personal circle, but I've been following Gentian, what you're building. I've been following, if that's how you pronounce it. I'm excited to hear how you pronounce it. But oh, beautiful, nailed it. And your personal journey and all of that, for a while now. And I think it's really incredible what you guys are doing. So this is truly just super cool. It feels like an honor, to hear more about how you got to where you're at and why. So for everyone else that somehow doesn't know, if you could give just a brief introduction of yourself and what you're building.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Oh, shucks for the kind words. I really appreciate that. Yeah, so I'm Daniel White. I'm the CEO of a startup based out of the UK, but we have offices in the US and Canada as well now. Called Gentian, as you say, and we use a combination of artificial intelligence, computer vision, and ecology to map biodiversity on the ground. We use satellite data, we buy satellite images, we look at them under certain light conditions, and we're able to undertake ecological assessments in literally minutes as opposed to months. And this is allowing organizations to really understand the truth about nature on land that they are responsible for. So we work with energy companies, forestry companies, indigenous groups up in the Pacific Northwest, um, property developers, basically anyone who manages land and who is a steward of nature. We help them understand the risks and essentially what they're responsible for, so they can do a much better job.
How long has this company been around?
The actual concept began around 10 years ago.
Okay.
So the company has been around formally since 2020. Um, and I joined as the full-time CEO 2 or 3 years ago. Can't remember exactly when. But the original concept was based around mapping urban green infrastructure.
Sure.
So we have changing weather conditions or changing climatic conditions happening right now. Cities are becoming hotter, rainfall is becoming more extreme, and this is starting to affect the lives of communities. So cities and insurers are now focusing attention on nature as a way to help these communities to become more resilient to those extreme weather events. This extends outside of cities, as you probably know. And we started the company being able or looking to map urban green infrastructure in a more efficient way, particularly focusing on something called a green roof, which is where you grow vegetation on top of a building. And they're really good for attenuating stormwater, they cool buildings, they create habitat in cities, they do a ton of really valuable things. And that's where we began, and we've expanded into ground level surveying and forests, and now we're working all over the world.
Were you in this space before joining as CEO, like in this industry, or were you somewhere completely different?
Yes and no. So as an undergrad, I studied ecology. I was really lucky to study habitat ecology, so I can say to my dad, my degree is being used in my career right now. Which is
That's right. When he watched this episode, make sure you know.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, shout out to my dad. Yeah, and but I became I suppose a clean tech entrepreneur around 15 years ago. So this is actually my third company.
Oh, nice.
But I've always been involved in, I suppose, clean tech or environmental entrepreneurship, whatever you
Well,
want
so
to
just
call it.
quickly, what were the first two?
Yeah, so my first company was a consultancy called The Behaviorist, and I my own personal mission was using behavioral science or behavioral economics as a means to motivate measurable change at the individual level in making more environmentally positive solutions. So, for example, motivate or helping to communicate information to households to reduce their energy consumption or their water consumption. And we would do randomized control trials with academic institutions, and we deliver measurable change across the populations where we were working. That company's still going and doing really well. The
Whoa,
second
that's all.
company,
Hey, congrats.
thank you, thank you. And then the second company is a company called Signal, and that is applying those behavioral techniques to a specific use case, which is motivating pilots or airline pilots and ships captains to be more fuel efficient in their operational activities.
Wow.
So we would use nudges, really well designed personalized communication, like a Fitbit would, and we would motivate pilots and ships captains to be more fuel efficient, and the savings are just astronomical. I mean, we'd save airlines millions of dollars in months just on the fuel efficiency gains from people switching off engines or just doing things more efficiently.
And it was that was a company that you had founded, or similar situation you came in as CEO.
Well, I founded all three companies.
Oh, okay.
So Gentian was an idea that I'd had, just as you do. I was kind of walking around the park and had an idea and spoke to another guy, and he had a problem. He was mapping green roofs, and I said, why don't we use AI? And then the company sort of formed. So I wasn't parachuted in. I was helping out at the time, but I wasn't a full-time CEO. I was kind of an
Got it.
advisory role. Um,
Understood.
and then a position became available, and conditions were just right, and I decided to make the move.
Okay, so then you came from running. You said Signal was that? There's that
That's right.
company. So you came. You
Hmm.
were you were full time running Signal, and then the time had come for you to transition into Gentian.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So, well, I think, well, okay. So something I love asking people, and usually it's not, hey, I've founded three companies, it's my third one, but so I'm excited to, a majority of people I find is that they either come from corporate and then found their own company, or it's the first company that they're starting. So I'm excited for what you think. But what have you learned either in the first company or Signal that inspired you to act in a particular way, or approach Gentian in a particular way? Is there anything specific about your experiences prior that have helped you better navigate building this company?
Many lessons. Many lessons.
Let's do two.
Uh, let's do two. Resilience is so important. And
Personally
that's
and the company.
hmm yeah. So an example of that would be if you're building a tech startup, you really need to be resilient to people prodding and poking and criticizing your organization for their own benefit. They want to make sure that they're minimizing their risks. So, for example, take an investor. And to dig into that a little further, if you're raising finance, which is often the way that these companies need to begin, they'll need to raise external capital to grow the company before they become profitable. This means over 90% of the folks you're going to speak to are going to say no. And often those reasons, perhaps you don't agree with them or they're not understandable. And having resilience to that, almost, well, a large amount of rejection is can be quite tough when you're a first time founder, because you've thought of this idea, you want to change the world,
Yeah.
and then you're going out there and everyone's saying, nah, yeah, no, not for me, or maybe
Yeah.
later. um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it requires a lot of self-belief in what you're
Okay.
trying to do. So that's the first thing. The second thing is organizations can only work effectively when trust is optimized. And there are lots of things that you can do to optimize trust. But fundamentally, I see trust as the kind of grease in the wheels. where if you know that you're delegating something to somebody and you trust that they're going to do the job well, um, that process can be so much smoother and more efficient and productive. And surrounding yourself with people who you trust and who trust you is absolutely crucial to an organization. So trusting who you work with or choosing who you work with is a really, really important decision. And it's something which I think is probably one of the main reasons why a lot of startups fail is those kind of relationships break down because of a lack of trust. And then friction comes in and costs go up. So I think those are the two lessons that pop off the top of my head are trust and resiliency.
So as far as trust goes, to what extent does it have to do specifically with the person that you choose to hire, that you choose to bring into your
Hmm.
team, that you choose to work with, the personal characteristics of them, and to what extent can you manufacture trust by building systems into your business, systems of accountability?
I think, I've been very fortunate in life. I've led before I became an entrepreneur, a very colorful background. I worked with the homeless for 9 years. I was a musician. I've done all sorts of crazy things that have put me in different social situations that have, I suppose, given me a good experience of dealing with lots of different moments and scenarios, which require a good understanding of the variability of characters and personalities that exist. So I always try and see the best in people and be compassionate with people. I think there's often there can be a mindset where again it feeds into sort of the mistrust side of things where people are out to get me or everyone's out for themselves. And I think a good sort of mantra within any company or even a team is we're all trying to do the same thing. We're all pushing in the same direction. We might have different ideas on how to get there, but we're all focused on the common objective. And so, insofar as character traits are concerned, I think compassion is definitely important because nobody knows everything. So having a kind of learning and growth mentality at the personal level, as well as an organizational level, is super important. Uncovering that is quite difficult, especially when just meeting somebody off straight off the bat.
Yeah.
Um, so there will be scenarios where you might think somebody is type A and they're in fact type B, and that's okay. Um, from a personal perspective, I find I do like to upskill people, almost mentor people, try and um, relay my experience to them and help them to grow and become much better than I am. As the saying goes, you surround yourself with much smarter people, which I fully believe in. What was the second part of your question? Sorry.
Yeah, it is as far as so. I appreciate you speaking to that character, that aspect of like seeking characteristics, because hiring is a huge part of growth of any company. And my second question was, in addition to those character traits, is do you feel like it's possible to manufacture trust in by building the systems of accountability within the company?
Yes, I do. I do. I think creating systems that allow for either a culture or a process of blunt feedback enables, and I use the word blunt because I can't think of a better word, but
That's a great
it,
word.
yeah, it's. I think we have an innate ability to take things personally, um, and so if I'm giving someone feedback about how something could have been better or how I'm feeling about a particular situation, um, it's not driven at the individual. It's driven at the outcome
Sure.
and trying to improve it. So I think if we build in systems that allow for a standardized or a preferred method of feedback, then people can feel comfortable that they are providing feedback in that way, it's okay, it's a safe space, because those kinds of conversations, the difficult ones, are actually the most valuable. Because if you don't address any kinds of disagreements or problems in any kind of human relationship, they're going to fester, and they can become quite horrible if you just leave them. So addressing things directly and bluntly and providing systems and processes that allow for that is important. And then putting in systems that allow people to provide feedback to you is, and
Huge.
letting people feel as if they're safe to tell you what they really feel is really, really important. So not becoming defensive or trying to put in processes or cultural statements that try and alleviate defensiveness is really key. So this is essentially, it's culture. This is all about building a company culture,
Yep. Yep.
and making that communication is clear, it's honest, and it's aligned.
Awesome. Well, within this, using these systems of blunt feedback and these awesome people that you put together in your team, I do want to give credit to how beautiful I think your guys' branding. I think you guys put out great content. I see that you guys have 4 different products now, at least on
Mhm.
from a software level. I see that one of them is mapping urban landscapes, so that is the core. But 2 things that I want to touch on. And the first thing we can talk about is product, but the second thing is how you guys go about, because I see, at least from my perspective, that like clean tech companies, technical companies, they don't often have such beautiful aesthetics, strong marketing, things like that. But so we'll get to that afterwards. But just as far as the product development has gone from your perspective, so you guys started with a product that mapped urban spaces.
Mhm.
What was your early success, or what was your early experience, not necessarily success, but your early experience putting forward that product, and who were your initial customers? How did you get them?
Great question. Um, so this goes back to what the start of the company, obviously, which was essentially a conversation between myself and one of the other founders, a chap by the name of Dusty Gedge. And Dusty is
What a beautiful
one
name.
of, he's got a great name. Yeah. You'll never forget that name. So he's got good branding as well. But he is one of, if not the world's leading expert in green roofs. I'm sure there are other people that would compete for him, but he's certainly up there with the
Okay.
best. And Dusty has a very rich network of contacts, both for companions, compatriots, working colleagues, but also customers or folks that organizations that he's worked with.
Okay.
And so our first contracts were by and large um, us going through Dusty's network, and providing a service which was more efficient than what they were already, or these organizations were already using. Now, these organizations were by and large local governments, or
Interesting.
contractors, building contractors. And this was,
Did you know him personally, or did you reach out to him
I've known
specifically for?
Dusty for nearly 20 years now.
Okay.
So
All right.
him and I go back a fair way. We have a mutual passion for bird watching, actually.
Ah, good.
So yeah, we can we can go walking with our binoculars. He knows a lot more about them than I do.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
um,
All
but
right. So
yeah,
so then, yeah, through his network, you established your first customers. How was what was the product development through the first or second or third experiences? Like, what specifically did you learn and improve on?
so this is a really good question, because I think this is really really important to scaling. Um, so as you can probably imagine, when you're building the concepts, a lot of the focus is on the technology that sits behind the service that you're providing. And in our case, this was how can we ensure that our use of artificial intelligence and computer vision is delivering the outputs in a more optimal way, or better than humans can do. That's point number one. But the way that was being delivered was still in a kind of consultancy way. We would go to an organization and we'd say, hey, look, we can do this much faster than others, but it was a project by project approach, and we were delivering a report at the end of it, which is the same output as a consultancy would do. That was always We were always aware of that, and that was just chapter one of our story. Chapter two was starting to focus on how we could scale that into something which was more automated and removing humans from the situation. In the truest sense of the word, or words, artificial intelligence means a self-learning model. And so we'd always had this vision of having a product that was automatically accessible, which we have now, which is a true sight, and that is something which is scalable to habitats across the world. So focusing more on our front end, our user experience, pricing strategy have always been part of our story. We're still building that right now. I
Sure,
think
sure.
I think it's really difficult with nature because markets aren't really established. People have different perceptions on what value is. So there's a lot of customer discovery to do, a lot of asking questions. We're still in the proverbial story right now. We're probably chapter 5 or 6 now, but we're building out products with a focus to mimicking or putting everything into that true sight kind of um, delivery mechanism or service where an
Okay.
individual can choose a site, they can get a survey or information, and that information is delivered to them within minutes. And we want to apply that for everything.
So if that was your vision from the beginning, and I think it's interesting that you said your first approach was more similar to consultancy than anything. How long were you? Did you have people building from the very beginning, or did you wait, 2 years to get this kind of proof of concept or whatever through the consultancy model to then start, get technical people or have the technical people part of your team actually start building? So was it from the beginning, or did you wait a couple years?
We waited, yeah.
Okay.
There are a few different elements to this. One is we're using satellite data, and satellite data has a huge variance in its quality or resolution. And one of the other founders of the company, Thomas, who came from the space sector himself, was very forthright, and he was right in pushing for us to use the most or the highest resolution data available. So our models were originally built around the most expensive data that we could access. And a lot of companies, when they move into this kind of satellite space, they go for the most accessible data, which
Mm,
is the free stuff. But it's coarse. You can't really get as much detail from that. So that was a lot of that data or imagery was it had to be checked by humans. There's a lot of manual input on this. So it was a gradual process of introducing AI into the company, introducing development into the company. So short answer to your question is we began with very rudimentary basic models, and we've slowly developed those into quite complex systems right now.
this is so awesome. I appreciate you, taking me through the from the start to finish. So to finish with this like this story, this novel. I mean, you referenced that book, what chapter you guys are in. I liked that metaphor, but as far as how your product developed, because a lot of the conversations, a lot of things I'm interested in are strictly, grow, a lot of the people that I follow online and stuff, it's about like, how do you grow your business? And people are like, oh, like, say, and we'll get into your experience with that quickly, but do all this stuff. But I think, speaking to the culture, like you're talking about, hiring the right people, having the systems in place for feedback, like talking about the development of a product, like these aren't things that people are like, choose the right CRM, like do email, like whatever. But these are things that really matter as far as growth, like you said, as far as scaling. So I think it's really cool, especially with where you guys are at, the development of how you guys have done this. So my last question is that you have, so you said you gradually introduced this. At what point did you go from only doing urban to, then I guess differentiating in your guys' brain between true sight You have Sage, you have Oracle.
Hmm.
These things.
Yes, it's a really, really good question.
Well, thank you.
The short answer is this was just customer need. So uh, we actually had a couple of property developers in the UK. There's a really interesting backstory to this. I'll try and keep this as short as possible. The UK was one of, if not the first country in the world to mandate biodiversity regulations for property development. It's something called
Wow.
biodiversity net gain. So this was a real driver for more efficient ways of mapping nature because in order to get planning consent to build something, you needed to have that information. So it became a bake-off between us and on-the-ground consultants. And of course, we're going to win because we're much more efficient. We work with a lot of those systems now. Excuse me. So to that point, we were getting inbound inquiries from property developers who were looking to buy sites. They couldn't access those sites because they didn't own the sites, so they were using our system as a way of making it more efficient to assess the value of those sites. And that sort of expanded into other use cases. We get approached by energy companies and so on and so forth to get to where we are now in places like forestry, peatlands, farmlands, all sorts of different habitats where a combination of regulations and economic drivers are pushing folks to really need to understand nature. And that's really exciting. It's the economics of nature are really starting to become clear.
Cool. I think well, I think that's a really good segue into your experience with the sales, marketing, growth, the more traditional topics around this type of stuff. And it's a good segue because what you're speaking to is this idea of regulation being like a lever of unlocking, a section of the market, or unlocking like a population of potential clients for you. So, and reference that again if it comes to mind for this question, but so you guys started, your initial customers were through personal connections, which I think is awesome. I think a lot of people start that way if they're lucky enough. At what point did you guys start? Have you ever done outbound motion, reach out? You speak to a lot of inbound because there's a lot of need that's present. I guess if you could first just take us through whatever off the top of your head, from the beginning of the company to about now, what have the different approaches to growth have been? Have they been outbound, more inbound? Have you not touched it? It's really been about product development. What's your experience with that been?
Yeah, it's kind of moving. We're going through a transition now, which ties in with the product being automated. That allows us to market ourselves in a digital way. So we're now going through a digital marketing strategy where we're now able to engage much more with social media. There needs our cost of sales going down. In relation to how we've got there, though, a lot of our initial sales activity was expensive, going out, speaking to people, asking them questions. There's a lot of discovery, a lot of lessons to be learned. Not all of them good, but they're still lessons. And so I think identifying your target user is obviously it's really important,
Mm,
but there are a number of different trade-offs that one has to make in order to identify the optimal first customers. And that could be their access to budget, it could be how quick their sales cycle, it could be the size of the market. There are lots of different trade-offs that different startups have to make based upon their capabilities, their product, and also their customer needs. But from our perspective, and this has been a little difficult for us to communicate, we've been transitioning, as we've talked about today, really from a variety through a sequence of different customer types, ranging from urban through to land management, property development in the UK, and now we've got more of an international focus. Um, my one of I suppose the best analogy I can bring to answer this question, or to close it off, is one of our team is fluent in Japanese, and a few years ago he noticed that in Japan, there were some great conversations occurring around nature, both at the government level, but also at the corporate level. And we made a concerted effort to support his theory, and we put resources into working in Japan. And it's proving, still at the early stages, it's proving to have been a really good decision. Japan is really pushing forwards with interacting with development and nature simultaneously. And so there are regions of the world now that are really understanding the value of nature, and seeing how this plays out on a global, from a global perspective is really interesting. How the different cultures and governments and businesses around the world are having different interactions with nature. It's so interesting to see how different cultures engage with it.
Yeah. Well, I guess so many questions, but I'll keep it to this one because I know we're coming up on time. Is there's a really interesting relationship between growth, the prospect for growth in clean tech, and the relationship with regulatory environments, like we just spoke to, and what you're saying in that
Hmm.
example is that there's opportunity in Japan because the current climate supports this direction. However, I guess, like we're seeing in the US, like you can move in a certain any country, the environment, the regulatory environment can move in a certain direction that supports a certain type of clean tech progress, and then a different regime comes in, and then that environment collapses. So in your eyes, do you see that there's a way? Is this just inherent to clean tech, where you just have to stay on top of regulatory environments, be able to I guess, track political environments and different markets and stuff? Or is there a way to set up a level of resiliency, not personally, but I guess in your, in your company, like against, shifting or maybe unpredictable regulatory environments?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, a phenomenal question. I think it's a trap to fall into regulation dependency.
Okay.
Um, so it's important that you have to create value, and that's fundamental to any company. You have to create value, and it has to be clearly communicated. You have to have a clear use case and a clear benefit to your user. Now, I think if you're allowing them to check boxes against regulations, well done. However, as you rightly point out, politics change, governments change, and things are thrown out and are ripped up or amended, and that can create uncertainty, and that can create and uncertainty is expensive. So understanding the true value of what your product does is really the key question, in my opinion, for any organization. The next question is, okay, so how do I communicate that to the market or customers? And that sounds simple, but it's actually extremely complex. Boiling that down to simple language is something that we've I wouldn't say we've struggled with. We've had some amazing assistance in this space, but it's still it's always moving, it's always changing, and it's always going to be crucially important or crucial. So understanding your messaging, understanding the value of your product is and that those are the two really important things that sit outside of regulations. Regulations are like an accelerator pedal, but they're not the engine.
Oh, I'm so glad. That makes me that makes me feel so much better that you have that perspective. I was hoping you'd say something like that, but I truly didn't know because you're like in it. Well, awesome. So I have two questions that I love to ask everybody towards the end as we're closing, and I'll make them quick. The first one is, what is the biggest hurdle that you or the company, however you want to answer it, is facing at the moment, and how is it also an opportunity?
The biggest hurdle for us is uncertain financial markets, which are creating an environment where early stage startups are having to work hard, or harder, to access growth capital. Um, how that's an opportunity, and this is kind of an obvious response, is
Okay.
it's enabling a lot of no's are becoming faster, or or failures are becoming faster. So it's a much more cutthroat environment right now, I think, for startups. So going back to my point about value, if you're not creating value quickly, you're going to struggle. In the investment community is taking a lot of care in understanding the business fundamentals behind their investments, and that's fair. But I think it's more cutthroat now. There are exceptions to the rule, like AI or LLM models or whatnot. But I think certainly for the clean tech environment, I think it's been a tough year or two
Yeah.
for fundraising for many companies.
Gotcha. Well, in inside of that environment, all of the things that we've spoken about, all of these things, what it could be something small, it can be something overarching for you, but what inspires you to continue going?
What inspires me is God, this sounds a bit mushy and a bit cheesy, but
Do it.
nature inspires me. I mean,
That's beautiful.
it's something that I've been close to since I was a kid, and I get a lot of value from nature. It's so powerful. It's everyone does. You go out for a walk in the park, the fresh air, the sound of the birds, all of that jazz. We all have relationships with nature, and I think we're coming to a point in time where we can't take it for granted anymore because it's changing so quickly, and we're able to see this change at Gentian. So, what inspires me is the sound of birds, looking at a tree, a flower, all that kind of stuff. I'm
Hell
such a
yeah.
cheesy guy.
I love that. Are you kidding me? That's great. I it's simple things, so it's very abundant. So if you allow it to exist, then you get a lot of inspiration every day. So I appreciate that. If there's anybody that just like me has been inspired to connect or follow your story, Daniel, what's the best way to do that?
Website gentian.io, gentian.io. And if you reach out to us, we'll be right back in touch saying lots of nice
Sick.
things.
That's right. Awesome. Well, this has been so cool. Thank you so much. This definitely check bucket list check. Awesome. So I'm looking forward to keeping to following up with you guys, see how you continue to grow, and thank you really for the conversation, and the insights.
Thanks for having me, Blake.
You got it.